Hey, what's going on? It's Gino Ray, host of Native as I Can Be Between Two Cultures. Welcome to this week's show, episode number 9. I'm going to be hanging out, talking with Astrid Castro, and going to be talking to her about adoption. November is Adoption Awareness Month, and she's got a very interesting adoption story. I won't get too much into it. I'll kind of let her tell it, but she's originally from Colombia and was adopted by a white family here in the States. And to say there was some shenanigans and goings on is really putting it mildly. But it's a really fascinating story, and she works in adoption to this day, and is going to be also telling us about a workshopping event she's having here in Portland, about kind of talking about what exactly Adoption Awareness Month is. So that's what is on tap for this episode. And then for the next couple weeks, got some pretty interesting things going on too. I'm going to be talking with a guy I met on the set of The Librarians when I was on that TV show. Another Native guy, and we're going to be talking about kind of the differences between living on the res and off the res. Res, by the way, of course, being short for reservation. And I, of course, have never lived on a reservation, and he has, so we're going to be talking about that and just sort of the trials and tribulations of res life. And I'm sure, like all Native people, he's got a good backstory as well. So that episode will be good. And then going to be talking with Jeremy and Jane Fugel. Jeremy actually moved to Thailand to meet Jane, sort of sight unseen, you could say. But that's not really true. They'd obviously seen each other. And but anyway, so he moved to Thailand to meet her in person, and they got married, and eventually she moved back to the United States with him. So they both have some experience, I think, being between two cultures, as he was in Thailand trying to win over a Thai family, and then she had to come to the States and win over a white family. I don't know how much winning over either one of them had to do, but that's just an interesting story to me, and I actually haven't heard a lot of it. I haven't heard a lot of the details, but they're here now, and I'm pretty excited about getting a chance to talk to them about that and share with you some funny little coincidences that exists in my relationship to him and to her. Just these odd things, but we'll get to that in a couple weeks. So but yeah, this week is the episode I've been looking forward to for a while, about transracial adoption. And one of these, the idea of this podcast being existing between cultures, this one is going to be existing between, racial cultures, Colombian and Caucasian, and then, of course, existing between a living with a birth family, living with your adopted family, and not being sort of a blood relative, or however you would put that. So yeah, it ought to be pretty interesting, and I've been looking forward to it for a while. So without further ado, this is Astrid Castro. This is the transracial adoption episode. Let's go. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Gino, and I'm talking with Astrid Castro. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. I'm doing well, thank you.
So coming up, November is Adoption Awareness Month, and you have an event coming up, an adoptee networking event. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is I offer education and support resources in the adult adoptee community. One of the things that's really vital, I think, in a healthy understanding of self is, if you are an adopted person, is to understand the history of adoption in this country or whatever country you live in, and then also having other peers to have support with around the topics that we bring up or discuss. So in November, on the second Wednesday of every month, November 13th, we are going to host a adult adoptee get-together social networking event here in Portland. And then I'm going to have one also in Denver, which will be a parallel conversation, and that's going to be on November 8th, Friday. And basically what it is it's the panel. We always have a panel discussion, and we have usually two panelists and myself, and the conversation is this month about Adoption Awareness Month. A lot of adult adoptees don't know that November is Adoption Awareness Month, and so one part of this is just educating and letting folks know that it exists, and people might come up to you that do know that, and I think being informed is kind of the best comeback tool, if you will, is to be informed and know these kind of things. So if somebody says to you, this is November is Adoption Awareness Month, are you celebrating, or what are you doing for the month? And to be aware that what it is, the history of it. Then there are adoptees who are not in support of Adoption Awareness Month, and then there's adoptees who are in support of Adoption Awareness Month. And so it gives an opportunity to bring two panelists on talking about this subject that give other people who are in the audience an opportunity to hear two kind of extremes, if you will, of the topic.
So you have kind of guest speakers, and do you guys do food? Is it kind of like an event, or is it like a lecture?
Well, so I call them networking. It's a networking speaker series. So what it is half of the time is educational speaker and learning from two panelists who have some thoughts and ideas about the topic and who are also adopted. And then the other half of the event, if you will, is networking and socializing and talking with others. And so I created this out of a need in the community where we seem to have two levels of support in most communities, and one is therapeutic support. You go to a therapist, you go to a therapeutic support group. Everybody goes around the room, introduces their name, and talks about their adoption. And then the other event, if you will, that happens in a lot of communities is adoptee just networking, just getting together. Let's go have drinks. Let's just go hiking together. Let's just be together and do events together. And so this is kind of bringing those two things, if you will, together and in one event. So there's socializing, networking, eating, conversing, and then there's an educational component as well.
And Laura is going to be a panelist this one coming up, right?
Exactly. So Laura, I've known her for a very long time, and and we're good friends. And the fact that she holds so much of the adoption constellation, the adoption experience of being a first and birth mother, and being an adult adoptee, and then also working in the industry. And I think that she can bring that conversation to talking about the history of Adoption Awareness Month and what that means to her as a birth mother, what it means to her as an adoptee, and then also as a professional, which are all three very different categories.
And so you run Astrid Castro Consulting. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, so actually, you're catching me right on the tail end of Astrid Castro Consulting as I am about to launch. And when this goes live, I don't know if it will already have been launched, but I will be launching Adoption Mosaic 2.0, if you will. I'm doing Adoption Mosaic again, where it was a nonprofit 15 years ago when I started it with 3 other women, and this time it will not be a nonprofit. It's an LLC and sole proprietor, and so I will be offering these workshops and these events as Adoption Mosaic, which is offering adoption education and support resources in the community. We're not a placement agency, so there's no part of what we do is placing children for adoption.
Well, and so the event is what kind of, so you gave us the date. Is there a location and a time, and is it limited to adoptees, or can anybody go to that?
Yeah, great questions. Okay, so yes, there is a location. It's at Southeast Uplift, and the address is 3534 Southeast Main Street here in Portland, Oregon. And anybody who's interested can call me for more information or go onto my Facebook page, which my Facebook page is currently Astrid Castro Consulting, and in the events section there's information about this. And so your other question was so location and who all can attend. So it's a model where it is open to adoptees are encouraged to invite their support community. So the adoptees who are registering and signing up can bring anybody in their community that they feel is somebody who should be in the know about this information, or hear from other adoptees, whether it's your partner, maybe your parents, maybe an extended family member, your therapist, your kid's therapist. It doesn't matter, as long as you're the one, as the adoptee is the one who has the ticket to invite them they can invite up to 3 people. So the non-adopted individual that would be attending is asked to sign a waiver of understanding, and this waiver of understanding basically just says that I understand I'm a guest in this adoptee-focused space and that my primary intention is to be a listener and to learn. And so we do ask all non-adoptees to sign that waiver of understanding.
Is there a cost?
There is. There's a $10 charge for it. And it is, we provide hors d'oeuvres and drinks and snacks and so forth.
Do you want me to put links to this stuff in the episode description?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The reason you are so into adoption, let's say, is because you have a very I don't know how to put it. Your adoption story is out there. It's out there, but it's also kind of common, right?
It's more common than not. If you're talking about what I've recently, in the last 7 years, what I discovered about my adoption, do you mean like international adoption, right, or how I came into care?
Well, both of those. So,
Okay.
Your story is you were born in Colombia, right? And you have an older sister, and your mom left in a kind of an abusive relationship, right? Sort of in the middle of the night kind of deal, and
Correct.
packed you guys in a duffel bag and escaped, right?
Yes.
And this is unbelievable to me, and this is what this is where I think mothers kind of have a leg up on fathers. She was cleaning restaurants and had you guys with her in kind of the middle of the night, right? In the duffel bag, and would go out and check on you and go back to cleaning restaurants, right?
Well, at that time, so once we were in Bucaramanga and she was cleaning restaurants, she would actually leave us under benches, and she describes that she would find cardboard boxes, open them up, and cover us to try to hide us as best she could. So then she would go and go clean restaurants like you described, and and check and have us be close enough by that she would check on us during her breaks, and then during the day, so that was by night, and we were sleeping at night under these benches and under these cardboard boxes. Granted, it is important to know that Colombia, where we were living in Bucaramanga, is very warm. And the average temperature is 78 to 90 degrees. So even at night, it doesn't get super cold. So we were sleeping there, and then she, during the day, would be with us, and we would play, I guess, just there in the park with her while she slept, in the same location.
And was there no relatives in the area that could watch you guys, or was she sort of trying to stay under the radar because of the way she left the situation?
Right. So it's important to, like, when we are looking back at our history and our stories, and when we're trying to understand our stories and how those stories affect who we are today, which we're learning more and more the importance of understanding childhood trauma. And so one of the things that is, I think, really critical to understand is that in Colombia in the 70s, when we were with her, and I think to some extent even today, but more so in the 70s, women were properties of men, and in the sense of if you were being abused physically, you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go to the authorities and get a restraining order on your husband, per se. So it was what she did by taking us and removing us from our abusive father, removing herself and us. She was breaking the law, and so she was terrified that if she went to the authorities or she went to anyone, that they would turn her in, and so she didn't seek support. And in fact, when she escaped our father, she put us and herself on a bus and drove us, or she didn't, the bus took us 10 hours away from any support that she had, all of her family and everybody, because she was afraid that even her siblings and her mother and her father would turn her in and make her go back to our abusive father.
And it's, I mean, we're not talking about the dark ages here. This is 40 years ago. I mean, that's
correct.
That's really hard to fathom.
Yeah.
So she was cleaning restaurants, and then she was able to find a different job in a different city, right?
Correct. So she, I guess there was a friend that she befriended in Bucaramanga, said, hey, I have this job in another town that you can go and wash. I think it was washing windows or something like that, but they pay much better. And so she went and accepted that job, but she there was a man who actually had said to her, "You need to get these girls off the street." I guess he had seen the three of us, and my sister and myself and our mother on the streets, and had given our mother some money to go find a room. And she did. She found a room in a house, and the landlord of the house, or she was living in the house as well, this other woman, said that she would take care of the two of us while our mother went and kind of set up shop in this other town, because this town was about 10 hours away as well on a bus. And so Carmenza, our birth mother, headed out and went to and started this job. And within probably, we don't know the exact date, but probably within 3 to 5 days of Carmenza leaving, we were taken to the orphanage, and basically we were sold in the black market of adoption at that time.
So, do you think the friend was complicit, or was the friend really looking out for her, trying to help her, and just accidentally led her into a pretty bad situation?
Do you mean the person who gave her the money?
Yeah, and the job, found her the job.
Yeah, no, my understanding is those were two different people.
Okay.
So the person who had seen us on the street and gave her money to find a room wasn't a friend. He was just a man who had continuously watched the three of us on the street, and he literally was a stranger and said, "Here's some money, go get yourself a room, like, stop, you need to get these girls off the street." And what's crazy is that I think it was 7 or maybe 10 years later, after that incident happened, she ran into him again, and she basically told him, he said, "Hey, how's it going? And how are the girls?" And she then proceeded to tell him how she had lost us, and she's, trying to actively look for us still. And they actually got together, and that's her husband today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was
Pretty
just kind of so she just happened upon the wrong living situation.
Correct. Correct.
So you guys, so they put you in would that be an orphanage or some kind of?
Yep.
And then how long were you in staying there?
Well, because there was the corruption that was happening, we were sent to another orphanage so that if Carmenza came back to look for us, she couldn't find us. So we were taken to another orphanage within a very short period of time of going into care. I'm going to say maybe 2 weeks, and got paperwork to send us to an orphanage in Bogota, which is a much bigger city. And there we stayed about 4 months before Norm and Chris here in the United States filed for adoption and paperwork. And so we went into care in October. We were taken in October, and then by February of the following year, so October, November, December, January, so 4 months, we were on a plane to the United States.
They were told you were 4 and 6? But you guys were actually, is that right? Or you guys were?
No, our mom and dad here in the United States were told that we were 3 and 4 years old, and we were actually 4. I was 4 and a half, and my sister was 6. So we were quite a bit older than we had been than our birth certificates, and then our parents had been told.
What are your parents' names again?
Norm and Chris.
Norm and Chris. And obviously they had no idea what was happening.
Correct. They were just given referral. My dad had said to me it was right around Thanksgiving that they had been given a referral, is what it's called, and the referral of the two of us, and said, here are the 2 girls. We're hoping that the 2 of you will adopt, and they agreed, and then they proceeded with the paperwork. And even in the 70s, a 4-month process, like from entering into care, is unheard of, right? From the moment we went into care to getting passports, Colombian passports, transferring orphanages. I mean, everything had to happen really quick because of the black markets aspect of this, quicker than most adoptions were happening back then, unless it was corruption.
And because of the way things were at this time, your mom couldn't go to the police, right?
Correct, because she, in a sense, and in this country, when I actually, at the very beginning, I kind of thought about like, how a woman who, in this country, that would never happen, because she would get support and so forth. Sorry, the dogs. Can you hear them?
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, sorry. So that, even here, a woman here could get support, and she. However, at the end of the day, if a woman takes her children out across the state line without her husband or her partner's or the children's father's consent, then there are laws against that as well. And so there's ways to go about it, but because there wasn't a system in place that actually supported her, that was what terrified her, that she would just be put back into her abusive situation, and not get any support, and just have to be stuck with this man who was abusing all three of us.
Where did you end up in the United States?
So my parents at the time lived in Massachusetts, in in Wayland, Massachusetts at the time. And so we flew to the Logan Airport. We had an escort that took us. And at that time, our parents were encouraged not to fly to Colombia because of the civil war that it was going through, and that it wasn't a safe place for people from the United States to go.
Yeah, that's convenient.
Yeah.
How come, this is one thing I was unsure of, how come they wouldn't adopt someone from the United States? Was it just quicker, or what was the reason?
That's a really good question, and it was one that I always was curious about hearing and learning and figuring out, like, why didn't you just adopt? There's plenty of kids that are in the States, especially in the 70s, there were so many kids that were in care. So my parents had planned to adopt through foster care, except the problem was when they started the process, the county had said to them, do you have any plans on moving? Because this process could take a while, first of all. And second of all, if you start the process and then move, you'll have to restart the process all over again in the new place that you live. And so my dad knew that his job was one that that moved him around a lot. So he knew that was not an option. And the two of them had been trying for quite a while to conceive and were unsuccessful in doing so. So they were just really sure about adopting a sibling group, an older sibling group, because they were older. And then when you ask my mom, why did you adopt from Colombia? She will talk about how wonderful the country is, and talk about how beautiful the people are, and how wonderful the scenery, the landscape is, and all of these things. And then if you ask my dad, he uses humor all the time about lots of things. And he was like, well, to be honest with you, kid, it was the program with the agency that we were working with that was the quickest program. And Colombia was the quickest country that we could work with at that time, and we were ready to be parents. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy doing in the work that I do now, which is helping adoptees to navigate these conversations with their adoptive parents if they feel like they can, or they just don't know how to go about it, or the tools or language to use, because so many of us have so many questions about where we came from, who we are, who we lived with before, who were our caretakers. Was it an orphanage? Was it a foster home? Was it my birth mother? Was it, and wanting to know the answers to really important questions, but not knowing how to seek those, and fear that they're hurting their adoptive family feelings by engaging and having these questions, these conversations. And so a big part of what I have done over the years is gone through those steps with my own family, with my own adoptive family, my parents, and really navigate and really kind of like dissected, like, how did it feel? What did it feel like for me to have my parents telling me such different reasons as to why they adopted, and how old I was, and what it was like to hear those two stories come from them, as you can imagine, was both wonderful and challenging. And I didn't feel like I really had the answer, but they were speaking their truth of the reason why they were individually choosing Colombia. But it was, it's interesting having to navigate those thoughts and feelings about answers to questions like that.
It's funny because when I first met Laura and she was telling me kind of her story, I didn't really realize it until she started talking about it, but there was actually quite a bit of adoption in my life that I hadn't really even thought of. I mean, my little brother is adopted. My oldest brother, Bill, my mom put him up for adoption. He when she was 18 or so, young, because at the time she just wasn't able to take care of him. And then, of course, my dad was removed from his family in Klamath Falls and put with a white family up here in the Portland area. So I just hadn't even put those pieces together till she started telling me her story.
Wow.
And, and then in kind of preparation for this podcast, even though I have these examples of adoption in my life, I still wasn't sure how to word things as to, like, I didn't want to sound old school and use the wrong words for you know what I mean, and not come off as ignorant.
Right.
But my mom has talked to me about that too, because she gave up. See, I don't know if the phrase is right. Gave up a child for adoption. I don't even know if, but
it's the most common used term for that, and yet it's also, when you know the history of why we use that term, it's really, and this is part of educating my community and my adoptee community. So most of us use the term, my mother gave me up, or put me up for adoption. And so, we hear more and more from women's stories who had either relinquished or had their parental rights terminated, and it's so far from that simple idea of, I just gave up my baby for adoption, or I put up my baby for adoption. So the put up for adoption is when we look at the orphan trains back in the 40s, 50s, in this country. We had orphan trains that do you know about those? Have you heard about those?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so they were trains that were putting orphaned kids on these trains on the East Coast, and then here in this country. And then these trains filled with children they weren't infants, but they were older children that were in asylums, is what we called them. We didn't call them orphanages at the time. And they would take, because there were too many children on the East Coast, these asylums were overpopulated, so they would put these kids on these trains, start the train on the east, and then start going through the country. And they would stop at major cities, and they would put the children up on kind of like an auction pedestal, if you will, and they would auction them off. And that is where we get the term for I was put up for adoption.
Because they were literally put up on top of...
Right.
Wow. I have never heard of that. That's one they probably like to leave out of the history books, I'm sure.
Right. It's not exactly, and as you can imagine, like whether you're an adoptee who uses that term or doesn't use that term, understanding the history of that term is, I believe, so vital. And to be in control of your own story is when your story is so fragmented already. So those are pieces of the history of adoption that I think are really important to kind of pass on to this next generation. So I will just say there is a PBS documentary, The Orphan Trains, and it is, I don't know if it's on Amazon, but if folks Google it and look for it, you get to meet some of those people who were on those trains in this documentary. It's really fascinating.
Well, yeah, and Laura kind of turned me on to the idea of the importance of meeting your birth family, because my older brother Bill, we only reconnected with him a couple years ago, and I actually had never even heard of him until I was, in my 30s, and
oh wow,
they just, I don't know if they intentionally kept that from me or just, I don't know, maybe just forgot, but I guess they had told me that they had actually tried to connect with him, and he rejected that connection. And my thoughts were at the time like, well, if he doesn't want to meet us, he doesn't want to meet us. That's fine. Like, I'm not gonna, and I'm not sure exactly what turned it around, but having conversations with my mom, she was wondering how he felt about her placing him for adoption, and then not doing the same with my sister, even though they were a couple years apart only. And I don't know. I'm not sure I was the person she should be having that conversation with. That sounds like something she should be talking to him. But I don't think she knows how to have that conversation. That's just uncomfortable, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, when we've been told our entire lives, the stork story, or you were brought here by a stork, or not encouraged to talk or ask questions, we train ourselves, or society trains us that these are not topics that people around us are comfortable having. It stirs things up, and nobody likes to talk about uncomfortable topics. So let's just keep this under wraps, And so, learning how to talk about it takes practice. Absolutely.
So, eventually, you grow up, and so did you get into this adoption advocacy before you met your birth mother?
Yes. So when I was 18, I sat on a panel, my first adoption panel ever, and I was volunteering at an organization, the Rocky Mountain Adoption Exchange, and they asked if I would be a panelist, and at that time there weren't very many adoptees that were panelists or talking publicly about their experience. There just weren't as many, and so there was a panel of all adoptive parents, and then I was the token adoptee, if you will. And I held that status, being the token adoptee, on panels whenever I could, because I realized how healing it was for me to be able to share some of my experiences as being a transracial adoptee, and with my sister, an international adoptee as well, being older, and some of the struggles that I had in adolescence that may or may not have been attributed to the fact that I had been adopted at an older age, and we're a different race than our mother and father and our family and community and so forth. So getting to sit on panels and talk to other prospective adoptive parents, at that time, that was who I was talking to, were prospective adoptive parents, felt like I was making a change in a direction for these parents that, okay, well, at least they heard my story. At least they aren't going to hopefully they won't racially isolate this child the way my sister and I were, because I didn't have this term at the time, right? But I had the idea and the notion and the thoughts and the feelings that came with that notion of racial isolation and the damaging aspect of what that can be for a child. So I could talk about those things, and people, these prospective adoptive parents, were sitting on their edge of their seats going, oh, this is so valuable, hearing from somebody who has this lived experience. And that is what launched my career. I was like, oh, I guess this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Right. And so then this part of the story I really love. So then you were actually vacationing in Colombia, right? And
no, this was years and years later, after I had already started an organization called Adoption Mosaic, the first round, and had been working 20-some years in the industry.
And had you tried to find your birth mom up until?
I had.
Yeah.
I had. So I was the sibling of the two of us, my sister and I. I was the one who always, my entire life, wanted to meet and find our birth mother. And my sister was like, well, good luck with that. I don't want any part of that. And I'm happy I have my closure. She had gone to Colombia and worked there, did kind of an exchange student thing, if you will. She deferred a college year, and went and worked in the orphanage that we came from, the second orphanage that we came from in Bogota, and worked there for a year, learned Spanish, and she was, I think, 17, 18 at the time when she did that, and then that was her process. Then she was done. She was like, nope, I don't want to do anything more around my adoption. I did what was right for me, and if you want to search for our birth mother, we had been told that we were biological siblings. We had no reason to believe that we weren't, and we are. So me searching and looking for my birth mother was a 15-year process, where I would put my big toe in it, try it out, try to call the adoption or the orphanage and the adoption agency in Massachusetts, and just digging around and seeing if I could find some information. And I kept coming into dead ends until, but I think where you're read in the article, my 7 years ago, my daughter, and I was then married to my husband, her dad, we had every other year, we traveled to Colombia to just play on the beach, hang out. I wanted my daughter or any of my kids to not experience the feeling like a visitor or like a tourist every time she went to Colombia. I wanted her to feel a part of Colombia because she was half Colombian, she's half Italian. She was going to a Spanish immersion school, so it was perfect that every other year we would, around the holidays, we would go and hang out on the beach and play and just hang out and have her hear Spanish and so forth. So then 7 years ago, she said, Mama, I really want to go to the town that you were born in. And she was 8 at the time. And I was like, we thought that I had been born in Bucaramanga, because this was before we found Carmenza. And so I said, well, it's in the mountains. We don't want to go there. Let's just go to the beach. And she said, no, I really want to see. I don't care if it's in the mountains. I don't care if it's not as fun. I really want to see where you were born. And Paulo, her dad, said, yeah, actually, we never have been there. Let's go there. And I agreed. And in agreeing, I grabbed my original passport picture of when my sister and I had first left Colombia in 1975. I had these black and white pictures of our original passport, pictures of each of us. And so I took it, and the article that I'd sent you, Gino, is the long version, but the short version is we basically when we got there, we ended up the last kind of resort of trying to maybe find somebody or do a search, and that had not been the intention at the beginning of this trip. But we decided, well, let's see if we just poke around, maybe we could find something. So we went to the last-ditch effort was we went to the newspaper, and a friend was with us. We had befriended this wonderful man who was a retired social worker, and we went to, I had said, I have this idea of going to the newspaper and maybe just getting a classified ad. We have that in the States. And he said, what a brilliant idea. Let's go there. And I will help you navigate this, talking with the newspaper and so forth. And he did. They ended up writing a full article. This was a Friday night. They wrote a full article about me being in Bucaramanga searching for my roots. And they put in these two pictures of my sister and myself when we first left Colombia. Mm-hmm. And they said, this is going to go to print on Monday, so I'm sure. And I was thinking, I'm sure we're not going to hear anything. We're getting on a plane on Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday that week. So I was like, I'm sure that'll be fine. And there's a contact information on there, and I'm sure when I get back to the States, if we're lucky, we'll hear from somebody over, the months or years or whatever. So Monday morning hits. 10 o'clock, by 10 o'clock, 4 women had called in and said, these are my girls.
Wow.
And of course, we don't have 4 birth mothers.
Right.
We only had 1. And so our friend, fortunately, he took the call. We didn't even know that they were calling in, and he knew enough of my story that he could kind of filter through and say, okay, well, actually the age of what you're describing doesn't match these girls, so I wish you the best. I don't think that these are your girls. So the one woman, one of the 4 women ended up being our birth mother, and we did do a DNA test, and that is something that isn't super popular to hear or to talk about in the world of adoption and search and reunion and so forth, is the importance of doing a DNA test to have that certificate or have that proof that, yes, this is my birth family. I have unfortunately heard of stories where there was a connection, there was an understanding from both parties, from the adoptee and from the birth family's side, that this was an actual reunion, that it wasn't corruption, it wasn't anybody who was trying to pretend that they were. They honestly, genuinely were like, we found each other. Then years later decided to do a DNA just for fun, and then found out that they were not actually related at all. And the years that they had spent building a relationship became really complex and really confusing and really hard. And so I encourage, and a lot of people will say, but I don't need to do a DNA test. Come here, let me show you the picture. We look exactly the same. And that often happens when we have spent our entire life living with people that don't look like us, that it is so common for us to see maybe other, like I grew up my whole life seeing other Latinx individuals, adults, that I was like, I wonder if we're related. I'm not used to looking at people who look like me. And so we ended up getting a DNA test with Carmenza immediately, like within 2 days of meeting her. And fortunately, she was the one who suggested it and said, yes, I absolutely want a DNA test because I've spent the last 36 years looking for my girls, and I have no interest in building a relationship with somebody who's not. And so I loved that she had that attitude.
Yeah.
And so we did, and the results came back that we were. And sure, when people look at pictures of her and pictures of me, they're like, Astrid, you didn't have to waste that money. She looks exactly like you. And boy, is it nice to know. And it's also, as bad as it is, when I have other I have people doubting that she's my birth mother all the time, which is really interesting, whether it's adoptive parents or adoptees who are like, well, how do you know that she really is? And I can say, oh, we got a DNA test. Oh, okay. And then the conversation stops, or the interrogation stops, because there's nothing worse than being asked by your community or your supportive community to say, do you ever wonder if she really is or isn't, or that doubt, because you've lived with that doubt your whole life, right? And so having the people who are the closest to you carry that doubt is really challenging, is really hard. So getting the DNA test also eliminates that. People don't question that.
Right. And so you placed the article Monday, and how soon after did you meet her?
No. We placed the article on Friday. It went to print on Monday morning at 10. Yep, and we were in the car and drove there and met her in person by, I want to say it was 12:30 that afternoon.
The same day?
The same day, hours after finding her, after her calling in, yeah.
Did you, when you saw her, or did you immediately have a gut feeling like this is the one, or was it what was that moment like? That had to be hard.
Right. That's such a great question, because if you had asked me before I found her, how do you think you're going to react? I would have told you something very different than what actually ended up happening. So when I saw her, she was sitting on her porch, her and her husband and her little sister. So we have a little sister who she parented. And they were all on their porch outside of their front door. And when we pulled up, Ignacio, our friend who was driving us and helping us out with this search, said, "Oh my God, Astrid, there you are. Look at that. That's clearly your mother."
Wow.
And when I saw her, I just stared at her, and I was like, I don't see it. And
really,
Paolo, Maya's dad, and everybody around us were like, What do you mean you don't see it? And I was like, I just don't see it. And do you really think it's her? Like, I'm going to wait for the DNA test before I get too emotionally caught up in all of this. So I was definitely protecting this emotional, like, in case it's not her, I really don't want to get too caught up.
And how did she react when she saw you?
So that was really hard for me. She grabbed me in a very loving way, hugged me, and then started wailing. And she was wailing like, okay, so the only way I can describe it is when you are watching an old school Italian movie and these Italian women are like launching their bodies over a coffin because somebody had just died. It's like that. There's a word for it, but I can never remember. It's this wailing noise of this cry and this wailing of like sadness. And she was doing that in my ear and speaking Spanish. And at that time I didn't speak Spanish. So all I heard was this woman just making, wailing and crying, and I did understand a couple of words, like I'm sorry, and then we had the translator that was helping us. I speak fluent Italian, so that was helping me with the Spanish a little bit, but not enough that I could stay with the flow of the conversation. And it was really, really hard to be part of hearing somebody's like grief and pain that close to, just that close to you, and knowing that you were a part of that. So she was picking up where she left off. She saw me, and she was like, I was 4.5 when the last time she saw me. She remembers what I look like, how I was, all of these things. And so for her, she was picking up where she left off. For me, I don't have memories of her physical existence, her physical beingness, if you will. So I was literally hugging. It was like, describe it as like an intimate stranger.
Yeah.
It was hard.
That's a very that's a complex dynamic too between the two of you when you're kind of guarded and she's kind of letting it all hang out, and she must have been pretty certain at that point. And had she had any kind of close calls, like you said, a couple women had called thinking you guys might be
right.
Had she had other incidents where she thought maybe she found you guys and it ended up not being true?
No. She had hired private investigators in those 36 years that she was looking for us, but she didn't ever get that. She didn't ever have that experience of feeling like she was close.
I don't know if you've had this conversation with her. Had she at any point kind of just given up on the idea of finding you guys?
No, never. And she's very clear. So to the point where, so in this reunion and in the discovery process of this reunion, I learned quite a bit of information. And one, as you had mentioned, our birthdays are not our birthdays. Another one was that we were not born in Bucaramanga, which is what our passports and what all of our documentation says we were. We were actually born in Bogota. But my entire life I've said that I am from Bucaramanga, and it's also much funner to say. Like when you're a kid, like the only people who know how to say that city are people who have either been there or lived there or are from there. So anyway, so we found this information out, and in finding this out, it turns out that her husband had said, the man who had met us on the street, all of us, years earlier, had said to her after they got married, like, we both have more family in Bogota that can support us. We need to move to Bogota and we can get jobs there. And she said, absolutely not. This is where I lost my girls, and I'm not moving until they come back and find me or I find them, because this is the only place they know where to go and look. So that's why they ended up staying in Bucaramanga.
Well, that's this is what I was mentioning earlier about she was working nights and taking care of you guys, and not to try and knock dads at all, but I mean that's really kind of a mother's love kind of thing, and her sticking in that town and just holding out hope that one day she would be reunited with her girls. I mean, that's really mother's love, I think. And I'm not saying that guys wouldn't or don't do the same. I just maybe you don't hear about it as often.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I think I have a couple of single dad men in my life that I know who, that maybe in that single parent role for dads, I've seen maybe more of that. But yeah, absolutely. And the fact that she was so persistent on, she would work and save money, and when she had enough money to hire somebody who would help search, because there were quite a bit of people at that time who were searchers of people. That was like a thing, because in the 70s there was a lot of kidnapping that was happening in the government, and so it was kidnapping like for ransom and for the drug lords and what was going on, the civil war that was going on. So there was a lot of kidnappings. So that's what she thought that had happened.
So
she thought we were still in Colombia. So she was hiring searchers to help find us there in Colombia. She didn't know that we had gone to the States.
So were you in contact with your sister throughout the day as this is kind of unfolding, or did you kind of wait for everything to finalize?
Yeah. No, so we didn't have cell phones or anything like that. And we had cell phones, but the only times they worked were when we were in our hotel and we had Wi-Fi. So, and I didn't want to call my sister and tell her I thought that I had found her birth mother. I wanted to call and tell her that I am pretty sure that I found her, and that I've met her personally, physically. And so I called Mia that night. She was the first person that I called when I got back to the hotel. And, I called her and I said, Mia, I think I found her birth mother. And she said, what? Like, she had no idea she knew I was going to Colombia, but she thought I was just going on a family trip, just like I did. And she had no idea that I was going to be trying to, and I didn't know I was going to be trying to look, but so for her it was a pretty big shock.
Your adoptive parents were they always supportive of you trying to find her, your birth mother?
Yes. Yes, I will say they were supportive in an old school supportive kind of fashion, if that makes sense. So they were supportive in telling us our whole life, if you ever want to search for your birth family, we would fully support you. Always telling us that verbally. Or we would, or of course you might be thinking about your birth family. If you ever are your birth mother, and you want to talk about it, you can talk to me about it. So they were attempting to be open and attempting to give us space to talk about it and say we could. But one of the things I do in my adoptive parent training now is I have a whole curriculum on how do you talk to your children about adoption. And one of the things is it is not your child's responsibility to come to you, to talk to you about their birth mother and to have the language and the skills and understanding. Because if they haven't been taught that language or they haven't seen it in action, been taught through example, there's no way they're going to know how to do that. It's not a natural instinct on how to do that. So you have to be in an environment that encourages that more than just telling your kid, oh, well, I grew up my whole life hearing I could talk about it if I wanted to. And I wanted to, but my sister and I didn't have the tools. We didn't even know how to talk to each other. Like, my sister and I almost never talked about adoption to each other.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So how often do you talk to your birth mom now?
Here's where the guilty daughter syndrome comes in. So I try to talk to her at least once a month. She would like it if I called every week. Well, she would like it if I called every day, but
I think everybody's mom is like that.
What's that?
I said I think everybody's mom is like that. I think we're all kind of guilty of that.
So she is hoping, like, now that I'm doing this interview, I did call her last weekend, and I'm trying to get in the habit of calling her every Sunday. It's challenging. My Spanish, I speak like a 5-year-old, and with my Spanish, so I'm not super comfortable with my Spanish. I went down there this summer and spent a month there, and for 2 weeks every single day I had a tutor that was a private tutor, which was very inexpensive, and I definitely will go and do that again because it helped my Spanish tremendously. But it's challenging because I don't speak Spanish fluently, and I want to have deep, in-depth conversations with her, but I don't know how.
Right. Well, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit here and just kind of talk about what it was like, being Colombian, growing up with this white family. Were you in kind of a white neighborhood? And just kind of talk a little bit about that. So what did your parents' family, kind of extended family, think about them adopting from Colombia?
That's a really good question. If you there's the story that's told to us. There's the emotions and feelings that we feel, and then there's the stories that we hear as we are adults. So it's like kind of when people ask me that question, if you had asked me when I was 15, it's very different than today, how I would describe that. So I think that the extended family was really happy for our parents for getting to finally be parents, that this was a means to an end with regard to their primary focus and goal was to experience parenthood. It wasn't to adopt children of color. It wasn't to adopt children who didn't speak their language. It wasn't to adopt secondary, it was to, let's go to a country that my mother describes and says that they decided on Colombia because there was also a lot of children that were in care, and they wanted to keep sibling group together, and that was kind of conscious in her head at the time, I guess. So hearing all of that she had some awareness and consciousness around these aspects of adopting children outside of the U.S. from a developing country that had experienced some poverty and so forth. So I think that the family structure, if you will, at the time, their extended family, their parents and our aunts and uncles and so forth, were excited for them for that. They weren't, I don't think that anybody was really conscious in the fact that we were, with a couple of exceptions, that have some very strong opinions about race in this country, and so old school thoughts and ideas. And so it's a really interesting question, because I don't think there was any consciousness around adopting kids who were of a different race and of a different culture, and that wasn't a big part of the thinking process for anybody that was involved.
Well, like in my case, growing up, I'm with biological family, but I'm the only native in the family. And so for me, learning about native culture, I kind of had to figure that out on my own. And a lot of the information I got was, from Westerns, which are not a great representation of Native American culture. So how were you able to connect to your Colombian heritage and culture?
So, unfortunately, we were raised in complete racial isolation, and that was not something that we experienced. My sister and I experienced until we were when we became adults. I think both of us then started having some people in our lives that were of the Spanish, Latino, Latinx communities. But before, when we were in high school, when we were in high school in the 80s, the mid to late 80s, in Massachusetts, in the suburbs that we were living in, they were busing out. There was the busing program, so they were busing the inner city kids of Boston all the way out to Sudbury, where we were living, in the town that we were living in. So it wasn't until we moved and lived there that we actually saw a community of POC, of people of color. However, there were not any Latinos, and as you can hear, I'm switching my language within the Latinx and Latino and Latina communities, because it's a term that I'm practicing. So bear with me as I'm as I'm doing that. That experience is the only experience that we had with being in direct relationship with anybody, any people of color. They were the African American kids that were bussed out from the city, and I immediately I felt very comfortable in the community of other POCs, And so I started going into the city, and those were my closest friends, were the kids that were living in the city and coming out during the day for school.
Yeah, I'm always drawn to other POCs, and there's either something, I don't know if it's unspoken and sometimes it's outright spoken, but there's a understanding there. Like there was a guy at work. He's not there anymore, but he was kind of walking by, and he looked sort of like I do, sort of vaguely native. And he was walking by, and I kind of went, "Hey, are you?" And he goes, "Yeah, are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then he kind of went, kind of like a sigh, like, whew, and he's like, "We'll talk. Yeah, nice to meet you." Like, and there's this kind of there's just like a connection, I think, that we have. So did you have any kind of racially charged incident as a child coming up?
Yes. I more than I could even count, more than I would even be willing to, we'd have to have another 4 hours. We because we also lived in the South, outside of Atlanta, Georgia, in the late 70s, in a suburb, and and then we also lived outside of Portland, Maine, and in the early 80s, and then in the late 80s we moved back to Massachusetts. So all of these areas that we lived in were suburbs of the big cities, and they were far enough out that we very rarely went into the big cities, maybe once or twice or a couple times a year. But living, I would say the worst two were living outside in Dunwoody, Georgia, and then also living in the 70s, and then living outside of Portland, Maine, and Windham, Maine, were the two hardest places to be because of the racial charge that existed for my sister and I. I was the kid who I would outwardly express my anger. My sister would internally internalize it, or just keep it into herself. She wouldn't. She didn't act out. She was a good student. But it just, that those things built up in her internally. And for me, I was always getting in trouble, getting into fights, sticking up for myself and my sister, because my sister, she was the older one of the two of us, but she was smaller in stature, and so she hated the fact that I would take that stance and be like, people can't talk to us like that. And she would say, I can fight my own battles. And so my life, my adolescence was constantly in this existence of feeling like I was always in fight or flight.
Mm-hmm. Did you talk to your parents about these kind of things happening? And then what was their reaction?
Yeah, so I remember coming home when we were living in Atlanta. My sister and I took the bus into school, and my sister, there was a little boy that my sister wanted to sit next to on the bus because she liked him and he liked her, and so they sat on the bus, and then another kid said, "Oh, you can't sit next to each other because salt and pepper don't match." And I got really mad, and my sister started crying, and so then I got into a fight, got kicked off the bus, and my mom was at home. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she was like, "When your dad comes home, we're going to have we're going to talk about this. You don't get to hit people. You don't get to use physical. I don't care what they said to you. That's not okay. That's not how we deal with conflict in this family." And so when my dad got home, I had to tell him what had happened, and he looked at me, dinner table, straight in my face, and he was like, "Well, kid, the last I checked, salt and pepper go on everything. They match just great." And I remember looking at him and being like, okay. I didn't know if I was in trouble or what, and that was it. That was the end of it.
Wow.
And that one experience, and then maybe a couple of others that trickle in, that those experiences were the foundation, if you will, on whether I could or couldn't talk to my parents about race and the things that we were experiencing at school and on the playground, and what things that people were saying to me. So I shut down. I knew that they didn't know how to support me, that their way of supporting me was brush it off, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're strong, you deserve to not be talked to like that, but you can't fight, you can't get into physical fights, that's not okay. So that was it. That was the extent of our conversations at home.
And that's not really, funny as it is, it's not really expressing an understanding or empathy, really, even. So yeah, so
right.
how could you go to them if they didn't? It would be hard for them to understand your situation, having never been in it.
Right, exactly. So, a big part of what I do now around education and talking with families about race and racism and how to deal with it, how to confront it, how to address it, how to help your children feel that that you and your home and the people who are connected, who are close to them, that they can talk to. These are the safe people they can talk to, and how do we teach through example? How do we use that exact same scenario, and how could we do it differently? And so role playing and playing that out for families is really, I think, very beneficial to helping them say, okay, well, at the end of the day, transracial adoption is still happening, and I believe will probably continue to always happen. And so how do we teach parents on what their actual responsibility is to help this child navigate a very racialized world that we live in?
The theme of this podcast, it's called Native as I Can Be Between Two Cultures. And I think being adopted and being transracially adopted is definitely between multiple cultures. And I'm always wanting to explore, because this was always my thing too, growing up, being a Native, living with a white family, is trying to sort of exist between these two cultures, or in one or the other at various times. And so that's why this story, I was definitely drawn to it. So would you recommend transracial adoption? Do you say it's fine, but this is what you kind of need to know and be ready for?
That's a really good question, and I'm chuckling because it's so complex. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is like self-awareness, self-knowledge, having an understanding of self with regard to our racialized communities that we live in, understanding what your place is and how you navigate the world with a racial lens on, has to be something that you're comfortable with. I think that if you are going to help a child navigate this existence, right, of looking one way and being raised in a community at another. Some would argue, like, absolutely you should, like, never raise a child in an isolated situation. And the more I'm moving in the direction of the kind of education and being able to say to families before they adopt, here's what you're signing up for, here's what I think that you're signing up for, and being, if you will, sometimes even brutally honest in those situations where they might, as a result, feel like they are being talked out of it or steered toward a different direction, if you will, away from transracial adoption, because if you've educated yourself around what transracial adoption means, and you say, yes, I am willing to do these things in the best interest of my child, then at the end of the day, I know the system is not recruiting enough POC families to bring children in from the foster care system for other countries, from anywhere. I know that we don't have enough POC families that are being recruited on a systematic level, and so therefore it's really hard to answer that question. Am I a supporter of transracial adoption or not? At the end of the day, that kind of question is one that really questions my existence as who I am as a person, because without transracial adoption, I would not exist, right? In the capacity that I exist today, I would be a very different person. And so it's almost impossible for me to answer that question.
Yeah, it's a pretty loaded question for sure, and it's there's probably not just a yes or no answer to it. Well, we've gone quite a bit of time. I thank you for coming on. Is there anything else you would like to add to this conversation?
No, other than just thank you, Gino, for inviting me. And I think that there are a lot of parallels that we can borrow from our experiences. And just because you don't have this direct experience of being transracially adopted, navigating these spaces of other folks in the world and how race has affected their lives is one that I have gained a tremendous amount of knowledge for myself and who I am. And so your willingness to bring me on to this podcast, and not only that, but also share your experience with others, is invaluable. And I just super appreciate you including me on that.
Absolutely. Real quick, do you want to mention where we can find you online and
yes.
just kind of plug your stuff again real quick?
Absolutely. So I am currently, you can find me at Astrid Castro Consulting, and in the month of November I will be transitioning to Adoption Mosaic. So both are .coms, and Astrid Castro Consulting, my first name, my last name, and the word consulting. And then on Instagram, it's dripping with adoption, because somehow my life seems to be dripping with adoption with my work and what I do and so forth. So I encourage you. And then on Facebook, it's just Astrid Castro Consulting until I relaunch Adoption Mosaic. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for being on the show. Everybody go check out her sites and her Instagram, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you, Dino.
Bye.